What if the single biggest threat to your financial future isn't your student loans, isn't the housing market, and it's definitely not your salary? It's the stuff quietly sitting inside your own home right now. Americans collectively spend over $1.2 trillion annually on non-essential goods. That's not a typo. Trillion. And the wildest part? The people with the least stuff are quietly winning the money game, not because they earn more, but because they figured out something that schools, banks, and certainly not retail companies will ever teach you. Stay with me because by the end of this video, the way you look at everything you own is going to change permanently. Here's a scenario that's going to feel uncomfortably close to home. Picture two people living in the same city, let's say Austin, Texas. Same zip code, same apartment complex, paying within $200 of each other in monthly rent. Person A earns $95,000 a year. Person B earns $52,000 a year. Now, before you assume you already know where this is going, let me describe what their lives actually look like inside those four walls. Person A's apartment looks like a Best Buy and a Pottery Barn had a baby. A 75-inch QLED television mounted on a custom media wall, a sectional sofa that ran $3,800 on sale, a kitchen stacked with a Vitamix, a Ninja Creamy, an air fryer, a sous vide setup, and a cold press juicer, at least 3 of which have never been used since the unboxing video moment wore off. Closets packed so aggressively that getting dressed every morning is its own form of cardio. And the second bedroom, it's not a bedroom anymore. It's a fulfillment center for forgotten online orders and abandoned hobby equipment. Here's the part that stings. Person A checks their bank account with a knot in their stomach that never fully goes away. One surprise car repair, one unexpected medical bill, one missed paycheck. That's the margin between their current life and a genuine financial crisis. Now step into Person B's apartment. The first thing you notice is space, not emptiness, intention. A clean, comfortable couch, a reasonably sized television, a kitchen with exactly the tools that get used every single week, a wardrobe where every piece has actually been worn in the last few months. The second bedroom is an actual guest room that functions as one. Person B opens their banking app with the kind of quiet confidence that no purchase can manufacture, but 18 months of savings absolutely can. 20% of every paycheck goes into index funds, automatically, before they even see it. Same zip code, same rent. The person earning nearly half as much has built 10 times the financial security. Now here's where the data makes this real and not just a feel-good story. According to the American Psychological Association, financial stress is the #1 source of stress for American adults consistently year after year, cutting across income levels in ways that should make everyone uncomfortable. A UCLA study tracking middle-class American families found that the majority of households used their living rooms, garages, and secondary bedrooms primarily as storage, not living space. Meanwhile, the Self-Storage Association reports that the U.S. has over 50,000 storage facilities, more than 5 times the number of Starbucks locations in the country. We are literally paying monthly fees to store things we already paid for and don't use. This isn't a video about income. This is a video about the invisible, almost never discussed relationship between your possessions and your money, and the 10 rules that separate people who always seem to have financial breathing room from people who never do, regardless of what their W-2 says. Quick pattern interrupt before we go further. Think of one thing you bought in the last 12 months that you've used fewer than 5 times. Just one. Hold it in your mind because we're about to do something uncomfortable with it. Everything you own costs you money twice. The first cost is obvious. It's the checkout price, the charge on your credit card statement, the number you justified to yourself in the moment. Done. But the second cost, that one runs silently in the background every single month, and most Americans never calculate it. Let's use a real example that shows up in millions of American homes. The Peloton. Average purchase price around $1,400 plus a $44 monthly subscription. That's cost number 1. But here's cost number 2. That bike occupies roughly 20 square feet of floor space. In most U.S. metros, residential space costs between $30 and $50 per square foot annually in implicit rent, meaning you're paying $600 to $1,000 per year to store it, whether you ride it or not. Add the mental overhead. Every time you walk past it and haven't used it this week, it delivers a quiet psychological invoice. Guilt, avoidance, a low-level tension that researchers at Princeton Neuroscience Institute have confirmed actually competes with your brain's ability to focus and make decisions. And then there's the cost that hurts the most, opportunity cost. That $1,400 invested in a simple S&P 500 index fund at its historical average return becomes roughly $4,800 over 15 years. You didn't just buy a stationary bike, you bought a stationary bike instead of a piece of your financial future. Financial planners have a term for this full accounting, total cost of ownership, or TCO. Businesses use it religiously for capital purchases. Almost nobody applies it to their personal consumer decisions. Minimalists apply it to everything instinctively, and the moment you start doing the same, most purchases stop looking like deals and start looking like what they actually are.
Rule 1. Calculate cost per use before every purchase. Here's the only honest measure of value that holds up mathematically and cuts through every marketing tactic ever invented. Before any purchase, estimate realistically how many times you will use it in a year. Divide the price by that number. That's your cost per use, and it's the number that actually matters. A $180 dress worn twice costs $90 per wear. A $350 pair of quality boots worn 3 times a week for 3 years costs less than $1.50 per wear. The more expensive item is dramatically cheaper in any honest sense. Applied to that $350 specialty kitchen gadget you'll use twice a year, you're paying $175 per use. That's an extraordinarily expensive way to make guacamole. This single calculation destroys impulse purchases faster than any budgeting app, spending tracker, or financial resolution ever will. Rule 2. The disappearance test. Stop thinking about decluttering as a weekend project and start thinking about it as a financial audit. Walk through your home right now and look at every object with one honest question. If this vanished tonight, would I spend real money to replace it? Not, is it theoretically useful? Not, did it cost a lot? Would you, with full awareness in your own money, go out and buy it again tomorrow? For most objects in most American homes, the honest answer is a hard no. The bread machine used once in 2021, the stock of books bought during a self-improvement phase that never quite arrived, the camping gear from one trip 5 years ago, the Nordic track that now functions primarily as a clothes hanger. These items exist in your life through inertia, not intention, and the uncomfortable truth is that inertia is expensive. According to a study by the National Association of Professional Organizers, 80% of the items Americans keep are never used. You are housing, insuring, organizing around, and mentally managing things you will never touch again. Rule 4. Never upgrade out of boredom. Pattern interrupt. When was the last time your phone actually stopped working? Not felt slow compared to a YouTube ad, not lacked a camera feature you saw on Instagram, actually failed to make calls, send texts, and run the apps you use daily? For most people reading this, the answer is never. And yet, the Consumer Technology Association reports that the average American replaces their smartphone every 2.5 years, frequently while the previous device functions perfectly, often on a financing plan that adds $30 to $50 to their monthly bills without them even categorizing it as debt. Apply that pattern across cars, laptops, televisions, appliances, and furniture over a 30-year period, and the cumulative cost of upgrading functional items out of boredom easily exceeds $150,000 to $200,000 per household. Minimalists maintain one clear definition of functional. Something is functional until it genuinely cannot perform its intended job. Boredom is not a malfunction. Wanting the new model is not a need. Upgrade culture is simply a $500 billion marketing machine that has become extraordinarily skilled at convincing you to solve problems you don't actually have. Rule 5. Engineer friction for spending, ease for saving. Willpower is not a financial strategy. It is a finite neurological resource that depletes throughout the day, and by 10 p.m. after a long Tuesday, your brain's resistance to a targeted Instagram ad or a well-designed product page is effectively zero. That's not a personal failing. That's how human cognition works, and every major retailer on the planet has spent billions of dollars understanding it better than you understand yourself. Minimalists don't fight this. They engineer around it. Remove saved card details from Amazon, Target, and every other retailer you shop impulsively. Delete shopping apps from your phone entirely. Unsubscribe from promotional emails, every single one. Apply a mandatory 48-hour waiting period to any non-essential purchase over $50. Meanwhile, flip the equation on the savings side. Automate your 401k contributions, your Roth IRA transfers, and your brokerage deposits to trigger the day your paycheck lands. The money moves before your brain registers it existed. Behavioral economists at the University of Chicago found that mandatory cooling off periods eliminate between 60 and 70% of impulse purchase desires. Most cravings for things are not needs. They are momentary dopamine responses that dissolve within 24 hours if you don't act on them in the moment. Rule 5. Count your possessions regularly. This rule sounds almost absurd until you actually do it, and then it becomes one of the most quietly powerful behavioral interventions you'll ever run on yourself. Pick one category. Count every item you own in that category. Write the number down. Count your t-shirts. Most Americans guess around 12 to 15 and discover they own 35 to 45. Count your kitchen gadgets, count your sneakers, count everything in the junk drawer. Yes, that drawer that exists in virtually every American home. The moment a number exists, it changes how you buy. You're no longer adding a hoodie to your wardrobe, you're bringing your hoodie collection to 23. The absurdity becomes visible and concrete in a way it simply isn't when your possessions are a vague, uncounted mass filling every available surface and closet. Set a maximum threshold for each category and enforce a one-in, one-out rule. Any new item requires removing an existing one. That single constraint introduces enough friction to fundamentally rewire your acquisition habits over time.
Rule 6. Rent and borrow before you commit to owning. This rule alone could realistically save the average American household tens of thousands of dollars over a decade. Here's the pattern that plays out constantly. Someone discovers an interest, immediately purchases all the associated gear in an enthusiasm-fueled weekend, uses everything intensively for about 6 weeks, and then never touches any of it again. The interest was real. The timing of the purchase was the problem. The solution is almost embarrassingly straightforward. Test before you invest. Thinking about getting into road cycling? Rent a quality bike from a local shop for 3 or 4 weekends before spending $1,500 on a setup. Curious about woodworking? Use a local makerspace or borrow tools from a neighbor. Want a kayak? Rent several times at different locations before buying one. The outdoor recreation rental industry exists precisely because this is smart, and the people who use it consistently spend far less on abandoned hobby equipment than those who buy first and discover the interest was temporary second. The US alone has an estimated $7.6 billion sitting in garages and closets as abandoned sporting goods. That's not a retail statistic. That's a monument to the buy first mentality. Rule 7. Calculate the full ecosystem cost. Every major purchase arrives with an invisible entourage of supporting expenses that the purchase price never reveals. This is the lifestyle multiplier, and it's the reason purchases that seem reasonable on paper consistently turn out to be genuinely unaffordable in practice. A boat in America is the textbook example. The purchase price is what gets discussed, but the ecosystem surrounding that purchase includes dock fees or storage, winterization, registration, liability insurance, towing equipment, safety gear, fuel, and ongoing maintenance, with marine industry data suggesting annual ownership costs run between 10 and 15% of the boat's purchase value every year, whether the boat leaves the driveway or not. A $35,000 boat costs between $3,500 and $5,000 annually just to own. A pool in the backyard multiplies into chemicals, cleaning equipment, a pool service, liability insurance adjustments, landscaping to match, and furniture to surround it. A vacation home multiplies into property taxes, HOA fees, maintenance, furnishing, and the travel costs to actually use it. Before any major purchase, map the full ecosystem on paper. The honest total is almost always significantly higher than the number that initially made the purchase feel reasonable, and often transforms a "we can afford this" into a clear "we actually cannot." Rule 8. Define enough before you start earning more money. Here is the trap that catches high-income Americans with remarkable, consistent efficiency. They never define what enough looks like, so every raise, every promotion, every bonus simply funds a lifestyle upgrade. The upgraded lifestyle immediately becomes the new baseline. They need another raise to feel like progress is happening. The cycle repeats indefinitely, and people earning $300,000 a year report the same financial anxiety and the same paycheck-to-paycheck feeling as people earning $75,000 because their expectations and expenses expanded in perfect lockstep with their income. Federal Reserve data consistently shows that roughly 40% of Americans couldn't cover a $400 emergency expense without borrowing. That statistic cuts across income brackets in ways that should be deeply alarming. It's not an income problem, it's an enough problem. Minimalists break this cycle by defining enough before the money arrives. What size home is genuinely sufficient for your life and your family? What vehicle actually meets your real transportation needs? What wardrobe realistically covers every situation you encounter? Write specific, honest answers. When your income grows beyond the cost of enough, every additional dollar flows directly into investments rather than lifestyle expansion. The person who defines enough at $70,000 of annual spending and grows their income to $130,000 is building generational wealth. The person earning the same $130,000 but redefining enough upward with every raise is building a more expensive version of the same financial anxiety. Rule 9. Measure wealth by optionality, not accumulation. This rule reframes the entire conversation about what being wealthy actually means. Conventional American culture measures wealth by accumulation: the house, the car, the watch, the neighborhood, the visible, photographable markers of success. Minimalists measure wealth by something entirely different. They measure it by what they can choose. Can you walk away from a job that is damaging your mental health without a financial panic attack? Can you take 3 months off to care for a sick parent without it destroying your finances? Can you say no to a lucrative client whose work compromises your values? Can you retire at 55 instead of 67? Can you move across the country for a relationship or an opportunity without needing the stars to align financially? These choices are only available to people who have built a meaningful gap between their income and their expenses. The VP earning $220,000 but carrying $210,000 in annual expenses has almost no real freedom. They are, regardless of their title, trapped. The teacher earning $58,000 but living on $38,000 has extraordinary optionality. They can absorb disruptions, take calculated risks, and make life decisions based on genuine preference rather than financial necessity. Every purchase you make is a trade, not just money for an object, but freedom for a possession. The question worth asking every time is whether this thing is worth the reduction in your ability to choose your own life.
Rule 10. Cyclical decluttering, not the annual purge. Most people who attempt minimalism make the exact same mistake. They do one intense weekend purge, fill the donation bags, haul everything to Goodwill, feel amazing for about 3 weeks, and then slowly, invisibly, imperceptibly accumulate right back to where they started. Amazon Prime makes this effortless. Target runs make this inevitable. The purge felt like an event, the reaccumulation felt like nothing. 2 years later, the closets are packed again and the anxiety is back. The sustainable fix is cyclical rather than episodic: a weekly awareness of what's entering your home, a monthly review of one specific category, a quarterly honest assessment of overall accumulation trends before they become overwhelming. Removing 3 to 5 items per week is manageable, sustainable, and almost invisible as a practice. It doesn't feel like sacrifice. Removing 300 items in one Saturday feels monumental, which is exactly why it doesn't sustain as a long-term behavior. Regularity creates awareness, and awareness prevents accumulation from rebuilding quietly in the background. Here's the piece of this conversation that most financial content never gets around to. The relationship between minimalism and money doesn't just run in one direction. Yes, owning less creates more money. We've laid that out across 10 concrete rules. But here's what's equally true and far less discussed. Having more money makes owning less feel natural, almost automatic. When your emergency fund is fully stocked, your Roth IRA is maxed, your net worth is growing month after month, the psychological pressure to buy things in order to feel successful quietly dissolves. Because the security and status you were unconsciously trying to manufacture with every purchase, you've actually built the real version of it, and real security satisfies the craving that stuff never could. This creates a virtuous cycle that compounds on itself like interest. Spending less generates savings. Savings create genuine security. Security removes the emotional pressure that drives most discretionary spending. Reduced spending accelerates savings further. Each turn of the cycle reinforces the next. It's not discipline in the conventional white-knuckle sense. It's a system that eventually becomes self-sustaining. The destructive version of this cycle is equally powerful and statistically far more common in America. Spending everything creates financial fragility. Fragility drives more spending as temporary emotional relief. The retail therapy is real, the relief is temporary, and the fragility deepens. More spending tightens the financial pressure further. The cycle runs until an external event, a layoff, a medical diagnosis, a divorce, an economic recession, forces a painful, involuntary breaking point. The choice between these two cycles matters more to your long-term financial outcome than your salary, your employer, your investment picks, or any other variable most financial content obsesses over. Here is your action plan. This week, run the disappearance test. Find 10 things you wouldn't replace if they vanished and get them out. This month, enforce the 48-hour rule on every non-essential purchase and watch how many of those desires simply dissolve. This quarter, automate one additional savings transfer to fire the moment your paycheck lands, before you see it, before you can spend it. The transformation compounds quietly, and one day you open your banking app and the number staring back at you tells a completely different story than it did 2 years ago. And here is the final piece of this puzzle that most people never connect. The people quietly winning with money, the ones sitting on 18 months of savings, maxing their Roth IRA, building real optionality, almost none of them look the part. They are driving ordinary cars, wearing unremarkable clothes, living in modest homes, not because they cannot afford better, but because they figured out that looking wealthy and being wealthy are two completely different games, and most Americans are playing the wrong one. The ones performing wealth are funding the ones actually building it. Every financed luxury car in your neighborhood is a monthly transfer from someone trying to look rich directly into the pocket of someone who already is. We broke that entire mindset down in detail in our video, Why Looking Poor is So Important. It is sitting right there on your screen. Go watch it right now because it is the perfect next step after everything we just covered today. And if this video hit different, hit that like button before you go. It costs nothing, it takes 1 second, and it genuinely helps Decoded reach people who need to hear this. We'll see you over there.